Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. This is Skylar Baker-Jordan, and today I am going to be reading from Why Pro-Life? Caring for the Unborn and Their Mothers by Randy Alcorn. For those of you who are new to my channel, I am reading through this book by a pro-life author. I am a pro-choice writer as well. I write for The Independent. I write for 100 Days in Appalachia. I've written for Newsweek and for HuffPost. And anyway, you can Google me. You can find me. But that's not the point. The point is that we're reading this book today. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Chapter 4. What's the difference between egg, sperm, embryo, and fetus? I don't really care, do you? Okay. 2 years before abortion was legalized in America, a pro-choice advocate instructed nurses in a prominent medical journal, quote, through public conditioning, use of language, concepts, and laws, the idea of abortion can be separated from the idea of killing. Sure, I mean, so they were basically saying this is how we implement our political agenda, which is exactly what you all have been doing for 50 years. I don't understand why that's sinister. The same year, a Los Angeles symposium offered this training. If you say, suck out the baby, you may easily generate or increase trauma. Say instead, empty the uterus, or we will scrape the lining of the uterus, but never say we will scrape away the baby. Okay, the way you talk about things matters, and the way that you articulate your message matters. You know, messaging matters. It does. And anybody who has ever worked in politics or campaigning will tell you that messaging matters. Sorry, my hair's a mess and I can see it, but pay attention to the content, not the appearance. I personally, I don't see the problem here. You know, framing issues in terms that, you know, support your position and in terms that take away the emotional reaction, that's just politics, you know, that's just politics. Language isn't just the expression of minds, but the molder of minds. That's true. That's why it matters. How words are used influence our receptivity to an idea, even an idea that, communicated in straightforward terms, would be abhorrent. Words that focus on the pregnancy in the uterus draw attention away from the person residing in the uterus. But no matter how we say it, evacuating the uterus or terminating a pregnancy is taking a human life. If you have been watching from the beginning, you will know that Randy and I have very different definitions of what is and is not a human life. Just keep that in mind as you're watching these videos. One pro-life feminist says, okay, this is a question for the feminists who are watching. You can answer in the comments below. Can a feminist be anti-choice? Can a feminist oppose abortion rights? Discuss. I'm a man. I'm not going to say one way or the other. I'm not the arbiter of who is or isn't or what is and isn't feminism. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. One pro-life feminist says, quote, pro-lifers don't object to terminating pregnancies. Pregnancies are only supposed to last for a short while. We favor terminating them at around 9 months. The objection is to killing children. I suppose that's supposed to be clever. What does fetus mean? That's the first subheading of this chapter. Like toddler and adolescent, the term embryo and fetus don't refer to non-humans, but to humans as particular stages of development. This is some interesting linguistic trickery here, is you're basically trying to redefine words to suit your political agenda. And it's clever. It's very clever. But you should be aware that that is what is happening here. They are trying to redefine fetus and embryo to be stages of human development when I don't believe anyone would recognize them as, certainly I don't know that a medical professional would recognize them as stages of human development in the same way you would infant, toddler, child, preteen, teenager, adult. Fetus is a Latin word variously translated offspring, young one, or little one. And again, I don't care. This is also why I don't really care about conservative interpretations of the Bible, because they've been translated so many times that I think in many ways it's just impossible to know the original meaning. as a lay person. It's scientifically inaccurate to say human embryo or fetus is not a human being simply because he's at an earlier stage of development than an infant. This is like saying that a toddler isn't a human being because he's not yet an adolescent. That is a false comparison. One of my daughters is 2 years older than the other. Does this mean she's 2 years better? Does this mean someone more human as they get bigger? If so, then adults are more human than children, and football players are more human than jockeys. Something non-human doesn't become human by getting older or bigger, or whatever is human from the beginning. No, that's true. But humans do get more rights as they get, I won't say bigger, but as they progress through the stages of development. An adult has more rights than a child. That's true. That's objectively true. An adult has the right to vote. An adult has the right to buy cigarettes or to buy alcohol. An adult has the right to live where they want. Children don't. If a child exercised their quote-unquote right to live where they want, the police would go after them as a runaway. So, the notion that we all have the same rights is at various stages of development is a lie. We don't. And should an embryo have the right to occupy its mother's body against her will? I don't think it should. After all, we would think the idea of a 10-year-old occupying its mother's body against her will is ludicrous. So, I don't know. Just some food for thought there. Let's keep going. The next one is egg or sperm a person. This one's an interesting one because I recently saw a coffee mug. It was for Father's Day, and it was supposed to be funny. It wasn't political. And it said, it had little cartoon sperm on it, and it said, "We used to live in your balls." And I kind of chuckled, but I also kind of thought it's very interesting that the male sex gamete, or whatever, it's the gamete, small gametes, the male gamete, is what they would consider to be the provider of life. So the egg is not alive. It's the sperm from the man that makes it alive. And I think that says something very interesting about the way that we view women in society, is that women are not fully human until there's a man, right? We define women through men all the time. We talk about Hillary Clinton as Bill's husband, for example. Former First Lady Hillary Clinton, I think that we've moved past that to some regard, but for a long time, certainly when this book was written, in the early 2000s, a lot of conservatives did denigrate then Senator Hillary Clinton by just saying she got there because her husband was Bill Clinton, who was the former president, blah, blah, blah. So, we do define women through men, and the question of, sperm being alive and we used to live in your balls being, we are here because you gave us life, Dad, while completely ignoring the fact that it's actually the woman who did the physical, arduous, traumatic labor of giving birth. And it bothered me. I laugh because, I'm not, a humorless scold, but when you really start to think about it, it's troubling logic. So, is egg or sperm a person? Be interested to see how this goes. I got off on a tangent there. I'm sorry. Carl Sagan ridiculed abortion opponents by asking, why isn't it murder to destroy a sperm or an egg? Let's find out. The answer, as every scientist should know, is that there is a fundamental difference between sperm and unfertilized eggs on the one hand and fertilized eggs or zygotes on the other. Like cells of one's hair or heart, neither egg nor sperm has the capacity to become other than what it is. When egg and sperm are joined, a new dynamic and genetically unique human life begins. This life is neither sperm nor egg, nor a simple combination of both. A fertilized egg is a newly conceived human being. It's a person with a life of its own on a rapid pace of self-directed development. From the instant of fertilization, that first single cell contains the entire genetic blueprint in all of its complexity. This accounts for every detail of human development, including the child's sex, hair and eye color, height, and skin tone. Take that single cell out of the just conceived zygote, put it in next to a chimpanzee cell, and a geneticist could easily identify the human. Its humanity is already that strikingly apparent. I mean, yeah, we can identify the skin cells are human versus chimpanzee. Does that make them alive? I mean, again, I don't know what your point is here. But props for not saying, oh, the man's what made it human, which is what that cup said. Product of conception, or POC. Okay, this book was written before the term person of color came into sort of popular usage on the left. Back in the early 2000s, I don't really remember anyone using POC, people of color, as a sort of acceptable term. And so when he says POC, he's not sort of stealing language from the left or anything, is my point. Is a common depersonalization of the unborn child. In reality, the infant, the 10-year-old, and the adult are all, quote, products of conception, no more or less than the fetus. I mean, that's technically true, I suppose. As the product of a horse's conception is always a horse, the product of human conception is always a human. The product of a horse's conception is not always a horse, though, right? Like, aren't donkeys technically something different? And they're part horse, part something else? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a scientist. I'm not. I do politics. I'm not a scientist. The data about embryonic stem cells is an example of semantic power. Stem cells are versatile master cells from which a variety of tissues and organs develop. Considered prime materials for biomedical research, they're available from benign human sources, including consenting adults, umbilical cord, blood, and placentas, but many scientists are determined to use stem cells from embryonic human babies who lose their lives in the harvesting. This ethical debate is serious implications for how we view human beings and whether they're expendable to serve others. You can tell this book was written in the early 2000s because stem cell research was a very, very controversial topic from 2000 to probably 2004, 2005. I don't really hear anyone debating stem cell research anymore. Maybe they are, and I just don't know about it, but yeah. Interestingly, the National Institute of Health found that the public was reacting against human embryonic stem cell research, destroying human embryos by experimentation. So the NIH chose a new term to describe exactly the same thing: human pluripotent stem cell research. The new term masks the reality that human embryos are the objects of experimentation. Rather than discontinue an unethical procedure, they found another name. I mean, they probably did that because you all raised a fucking political stink about life-saving procedures. But whatever. Go off, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I don't... No doubts. If human cloning ever succeeds, which I hope it does not, that's a Skylar statement. If human cloning ever succeeds, a person would enter the life continuum at a point after conception. This would do nothing to change their human status. It's not a person's presence on the human life continuum, nor how they arrive there, that matters. My understanding is that a clone would still have to go through sort of gestational phase. I don't know enough about it. But also, side note, this reminds me of a debate that was had in the late 1990s on the soap opera Guiding Light, where the character Reva was cloned, and then she came back from the dead because she wasn't really dead, and then she had to fight her clone. And is the clone really her? Is it a person? Anyway, this book is very much of its time. Dr. Thomas Hilgers, that's Hilgers, I have no idea who this is, so you'll want to look him up to know his agenda, states no individual living body can become a person unless it already is a person. No living being can become anything other than what it already essentially is. Abortion providers have become more direct and admitting what happens in abortion. Dr. Warren Hearn, look him up so you know his agenda, who teaches doctors how to perform abortions, okay, clearly pro-choice, describes his work as It began an abortion. I began an abortion on a young woman who was 17 weeks pregnant. Then I inserted my forceps into the uterus and applied them to the head of the fetus, which was still alive since fetal injection is not done at that stage of pregnancy. I closed the forceps, crushing the skull of the fetus, and withdrew the forceps. The fetus, now dead, slid out more or less intact. Okay, so maybe let's look at the context of that claim, because that is footnoted. This is chapter 4, and that's footnote 10. Okay, this is a website you should be able to access. Slate, Medical Examiner. Did I violate the partial birth abortion ban? A doctor ponders a new era of prosecution by Dr. Warren M. Hearn. It was dated October 22nd, 2003, and you can find it at... I'll try and find the article and put it in the description. If I don't, you can find it. This article says slate.msn.com. That link's probably going to be broken because slate.com is the address now. So if I don't remember to put it in the comments below, you remember to Google it if you want to read it. This man, who has dedicated his life to performing abortions and teaching others how to do them, has absolutely no doubt that abortion kills baby. Do you know something he doesn't? Well, I don't know because I've not read that. That's the end of chapter 4. Let's go on to chapter 5 because chapter 5 is relatively short. So chapter 5 is the unborn part of the woman's body. We're on chapter 5 now. As have many others, philosopher Mortimer Adler claimed that the unborn is, quote, a part of the mother's body in the same sense that an individual's arm or leg is part of a living organism. An individual's decision to have an arm or leg amputated falls within the sphere of privacy, the freedom to do as one pleases in all matters that do not injure others or the public welfare. That's the end of the quote. I would agree with philosopher Mortimer Adler. That kind of sums up my view on abortion pretty well. Whether it's part of the woman's body or not is immaterial to me because the woman's body is going to be put at risk by virtue of delivery because, again, it bears repeating, pregnancy kills, delivery kills, women die in childbirth. But yeah, I would agree with philosopher Mortimer Adler there, I think, for the most part. So the first heading is true or false. I guess, is Mortimer Adler telling the truth or is he a big ol' fibber? A body part is defined by the common genetic code it shares with the rest of its body. Every cell of the mother's tonsils, appendix, heart, and lungs shares the same genetic code. The unborn child also has a genetic code, but it is distinctly different from the mother's. I mean, that's true. Every cell of his body is uniquely his, each different from the cell of his mother's body. Yes, but he wouldn't have a body if it wasn't for his mother. And he's still relying on her body for life, really, especially in the first trimester, second trimester probably too. Often his blood type is also different, and half the time his gender is different. Gender is used there as a synonym for sex. If the woman's body is the only one involved in a pregnancy, then consider the body parts she must have: 2 noses, 4 legs, 2 sets of fingerprints, 2 brains, 2 circulatory systems, and 2 skeletal systems. Half the time, she must also have male genitals. If it's impossible for a woman to have male genitals, then the boy she is carrying cannot be part of her body. No comment. A Chinese zygote implanted in a Swedish woman will always be Chinese, not Swedish, because his identity is based on his genetic code, not that of the body in which he resides. Ooh, that's a tricky one. Ethnically, I suppose, yes, he would be Chinese, but if he's growing up in Sweden, he would be Swedish in terms of law and citizenship and nationality. So, I mean, again, you're getting into terms that are nebulous there. What does it mean to be Swedish? What does it mean to be Chinese? Is somebody whose ancestors were Chinese and came from China Chinese if they grew up in Sweden and they never stepped foot in China? They've only ever been Sweden? Yeah, I don't think that you could call somebody Chinese who's never been to China and I mean, it gets complicated because maybe the cultural identity. I don't know. I'm just saying the point is that these concepts are a lot more complicated than this book is presenting it as. A child may die and the mother live, or the mother may die and the child live, proving they are two separate individuals. Yes, but that's the problem. The mother may die. The mother may die. She has to have a say because she might die. You're so close, Randy. You're so close to getting it. But that really betrays just, how little they think of women. Well, the woman might die. Shrug, big deal. In prenatal surgeries, the unborn, still connected to her mother by the umbilical cord, is removed, given anesthesia, operated on, and reinserted into her mother. The child is called a patient, is operated on, and has her own medical records indicating blood type and vital signs. Yeah, the child would need to, because that would need to be in the records for once the child is born, and I think that shows how we are in some really gray areas when we're talking about this, because just like the question of, is the person whose ancestors were Chinese Swedish if they grew up in Sweden and are a Swedish citizen and that's their nationality? Where do you draw the line on defining something like that? Well, where do you draw the line on defining life? It's not a straightforward answer. It is a lot more complicated than I think people, maybe on both sides of the debate, to be frank, have allowed. And maybe even more complicated than I have allowed in the past. But I think that that's the point. And this book is really oversimplifying what are some very profound and complex questions. And I don't appreciate that. I expected more, Randy. In 1999, an unborn child named Samuel Armis was operated on for spina bifida. His photograph in Life magazine captured the world's attention. As the surgeon was closing, baby Samuel pushed his hand out of the womb and grabbed the surgeon's finger. Photojournalist Michael Clancy caught this astonishing act on film. See the very similar award-winning Life magazine photo of unborn Sarah Marie Schweitzer on the back cover of this book. There, can you see it? Just so you're aware of what he's talking about. Clancy reported suddenly an entire arm thrust out of the opening, then pulled back until just a little hand was showing. The doctor reached over and lifted the hand, which reacted and squeezed the doctor's finger. As if testing for strength, the doctor shook the tiny fist. Samuel held firm. I took the picture. Wow. Samuel Armis was sewn back into his mother's womb and then born nearly 4 months later. How did seeing Samuel grab the surgeon's finger affect Clancy? Quote, in that instant, Clancy went from being pro-choice to being pro-life. As he put it, I was totally in shock for 2 hours after the surgery. I know abortion is wrong now. It's absolutely wrong. No, it's not. Does anyone seriously believe that this pain-feeling, finger-grabbing patient was simply an appendage of his mother's body? I don't think it matters if he was or not. The fact that his mother's body has to be on the line for him to survive is what matters. Can it be credibly argued that once he's placed back inside his mother, it should be legal to kill that same patient any time during the remaining 4 months until he's born? Yes. I think it can be credibly argued, and I think that I've done that throughout this book because, again, it's not just him that has rights here. It's his mother. His mother has to have the right to her own body. Otherwise, what does she have? And what do any of us have if we don't have the rights to ourselves? I don't understand. Inconsistencies everywhere is the next subheading. At the Medical University of South Carolina, if a pregnant woman's urine test indicates cocaine use, she can be arrested for distributing drugs to a minor. That's fucking awful. That's evil. Similarly, in Illinois, a pregnant woman who takes an illegal drug can be prosecuted for, quote, delivering a controlled substance to a minor. Again, fucking evil. And I hope these laws have changed as we've developed a better understanding of addiction. This is an explicit recognition that the unborn is a person with rights deserving protection even from his mother. However, that same woman who's prosecuted and jailed for endangering her child is, quote, or no, I'm sorry, this isn't a quote, is free to abort that same child. Yeah, that's a contradiction, but this is a very tricky subject. In America today, it's illegal to harm your preborn child, but it's perfectly legal to kill them. Every alcohol-serving establishment in Oregon is required to post this sign. Again, this book was written a long time ago, so I don't know if this is still the case, but that's the sign. The U.S. if alcohol harms unborn babies, what does abortion do to them? The U.S. Congress voted unanimously to delay capital punishment of a pregnant woman until after her delivery. Every congressman, even if pro-choice, knew that this unborn baby was a separate person innocent of his mother's crime. No stay of execution was requested for the sake of the mother's tonsils, hearts, or kidney. No, but again, it doesn't matter. Like, the argument has never been necessarily that it isn't a baby, although I'm not convinced that it is alive. But that is irrelevant to the argument of bodily autonomy. And again, we're talking cross purposes here, and that's really the frustrating thing about the abortion debate, is that we really are talking cross purposes. Many states have passed fetal homicide laws, declaring it murder for anyone but the mother to deliberately take the life of a preborn child. These laws are explicit affirmations that a child is a human being. In 2004, Congress, which was controlled by evangelical Republicans at the time, passed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, which states that someone who intentionally kills or attempts to kill the unborn child be punished for intentionally killing or attempting to kill a human being. Again, remember, 2004 evangelical Republican Congress. Consider the bizarre implications of this double standard. If a woman is scheduled to get an abortion, but on her way out to the abortion clinic, her baby is killed in utero, the baby's killer will be prosecuted for murder. But if this murder doesn't occur, an hour later, the doctor will be paid to perform the legal procedure, killing exactly the same child in a way that's probably more gruesome. To the child, what's the difference? Who kills her? Probably very little, but again, I don't think the child's right to life trumps the mother's right to bodily autonomy. I think that the mother has to have a say. I'm sorry. She does. A lesson from Louise Brown. Okay, this is the last section, and then we'll end because this video is running long. Being inside something isn't the same as being part of something. A car isn't part of a garage because it's parked there. Louise Brown, the first test tube baby, was conceived when sperm and egg joined in a petri dish. Did she become part of her mother's body when she was placed in her uterus? No more than she'd been part of the petri dish when she lived there. Human beings shouldn't be discriminated against because of their place of residence. Oh, they are all the time. You all love to do that. Are you kidding? With your voter suppression laws, the fact that you're putting like one drop box in the county that Houston's in, and then one drop box in this rural West Texas county that has like 68 people in it. Yeah, that's some sort of discrimination based on where they live. Homeless people are discriminated against all the time because they live on the streets. Like, again, we do that. Should we? No, we shouldn't. But we do that, and the right does that, and the right loves to do that. The sanctimony here is really annoying. And I'm sure he would probably say the same about my video. Like, I'm self-aware enough to admit that. There's nothing about birth that makes a baby essentially different than he was before birth. Well, there is. He's no longer relying on nourishment or oxygen or life-sustaining needs from another human being. He's able to, ostensibly do all those things on his own. Now, human beings are born incredibly immature. So human babies do need help from adults, but other willing adults can provide those services. No one is forcing a mother to provide those services and those needs and to fill those needs. That's why adoption is a thing. But you are forcing her to do that against her will. If you're forcing her to have birth, you're forcing her to 9 months of that. There's no magic that changes a child's nature when she moves 20 inches from inside her mother or outside. All right, we're going to end there. This one's a little bit longer, but we did 2 chapters today. So the next time I come back, we will be on chapter 6, which is what do the pictures tell us? If there are pictures in here, I may or may not share them. I don't know. But until then, you all take care. I'll talk to you later. Bye.